Okay, good day. This is the first podcast that I'm officially doing. I've done a number of them before, but I have an amazing, I was going to say young man, certainly young by comparison to me, Lee Randalls. We're going to have a conversation. The working title of this series is The Courage to Be, or The Art of Courage, or Authentic Conversations. So the title will become known. But Lee, why don't you jump in and introduce yourself? And I think with our friend ChatGPT, I've been able to craft some hopefully some interesting questions. I always think there should be a disclaimer with ChatGPT. Did I write this
Yeah.
using ChatGPT or did I not? But it came up with a good one, and it suggested this question: if you and I were sitting around a fire with a glass of wine or whatever or not, who are you really? And what would you say?
Hmm. It's a great question. I feel honored to be here. So thank you for inviting me.
You're most
Now,
welcome.
there's kind of two pieces to that. I always find that there's the surface conversation, what do I do for a living? Where am I from? Where do I live? And then there's the deeper truth. Who am I? What occupies my mind? What do I dedicate my heart to? Um, so the question is, who am I?
So why don't you do the first piece, which is like,
Okay.
give us a
Yeah.
little minute or two. Who are you? Where do you live? What's your like? What do you do?
Yeah.
Like those kinds of questions. So people go, oh, okay, okay.
So I live in Hart Bay. I've been living in Cape Town for 13 years, originally from Joburg. Um, I have my own coaching practice. I've been involved in TV and film for many, many years, but I'm a men's coach and a recovery coach. I have a beautiful family. My daughter's 2 years old and she's the light of my life. I'm obsessed with sport.
Hmm,
And yeah, I mean that's pretty much the surface stuff.
beautiful. That's great. Because
Yeah.
that's actually how we met was through touch rugby. I think during COVID, wasn't it?
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, many years ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fantastic. Good
I
man.
suppose my
That's a beautiful
mm,
lie of the land.
mm,
Recovery. You said I don't want to. Often we talk in language that I'm guilty of this. Talk in language that I just assume people would understand. What do you mean by
mm.
recovery? For those who don't know.
Yeah, so thanks for that. So recovery from addiction. I've walked a long road of addiction with many, many different things, not just substances. Yeah, I've struggled with behavior stuff. Uh, yeah, it's been a long road for me. I've been in and out of rehab for many years. I mean, this is a long time ago. It's been 12 years now since I've been clean. And yeah, it's been a long and rocky road, but if it wasn't for that moment of surrender, admitting that I was losing this battle, a battle that I tried to control for 20 years, I wouldn't be here today. So I have taken sort of my journey and my experiences and my embodiment of what's worked for me, and I help other people. And yeah, especially focusing on men's work while doing so. Yeah, it's very, very close to my heart.
Good, fantastic.
Yeah. Mm,
Let's and don't overthink this. Just go with the flow of it. So if you weren't your job and you weren't a dad and you weren't your various
mm,
identities,
mm,
uh, who are you? Who do you think you are? Who do you feel you are?
mm. I always find it such a tricky question because I always want to answer with the mind, and I don't believe my mind is who I am. My mind can be full of constructs and stories and identities that I've built up through the years. So to answer that question always needs to come from the heart. And who am I? If I had to rattle off a few affirmations, I am love. I am presence. I am, without sounding cheesy, I am light, I am attractive, I am creative. And these are all essences that come from my spirit and my heart. I would say that's me in a nutshell.
Beautiful. My partner Juanita said to me this morning, "You're God's gift," and I was like, in my
Mm.
mind, I went to like, you think you're God's gift to women, like those silly comments, right? And she said,
Sure.
consider, you're a gift
Yeah.
from God. It was like it's a hard one for the mind to digest,
Mm.
but the body knows it.
Yeah, and exactly, the body knows it. And that's why I always trust my body more than my mind, because my mind can bullshit me all the time. So a lot of the time when I check in with myself around where I'm at, I listen to my body. My body speaks to me through my nervous system, through pain, through discomfort, through ease. So I rely on my body a lot. It has a divine intelligence that I don't think the mind has that same sort of wisdom. Yeah. And it's interesting what you touched on now around what your partner said to you, being a gift from God, because someone very close to me, we were talking the other day around what our purpose is. Everyone's on a journey, well, not everyone, but so many people kind of go into a space or a journey to find themselves. And often the question raised is, what is my purpose? And and we were having this discussion, and for me, I'll speak for myself. My purpose is to be me, to be Lee. That's my purpose. And if I operate from that space, from my gold and what I can bring to the world, then I'm aligned with what I'm here to do.
Yeah. It's beautifully and simply put. I think I've spent a lot of time like, what is my purpose? Like,
Mm,
like another way of saying that is my purpose is to be here and be present, and then what
mm,
shows up is exactly what's meant to show up. One of the
mm,
things I've been thinking about recently is this kind of it's actually a beautiful piece by another mankind man who actually introduced me to the Mankind Project, which you and I are familiar with.
yes.
He was a veteran therapist, this piece saying that,
Mm,
we are so kind of, basically saying therapy needs to be looked at in a different way. It's so obsessivize, or the term is,
mm,
ourselves, the identity, me, my
mm,
childhood, my parents, like me, 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 me. And what
mhm,
we need to do more of is look at the larger context, of the world and the environment that we live in.
mm. Absolutely.
Mm.
And first of all, I just want to touch on the fact that, I get so caught up in my own stories, my own healing, my own process. And I need to remember that I'm just a manifestation of my ancestors. That's that's all I am.
Mm.
And I've done quite a lot of work with plant medicine. It's been a big part of my healing journey and expansion. And in the beginning of that journey, it was all about self-healing. How can I move through this trauma, or how can I look at something that happened when I was 9 years old? And it's all about me. And the longer, the deeper I went on that journey, my prayers, instead of turning inwards, they turned outwards. Because at the end of the day, we're all a collective consciousness.
Mm.
So I'm connected to you. I'm connect, we all connected as one giant organism. And when I started turning my focus from within to without, it felt different, and
Yeah.
it felt more healing. Not in the sense that I'm healing the world through my own plant medicine work, but the expansion of my own vibration out into the outer world changed dramatically.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. So do you think that you chose your work, or did your work choose you? And by work, I'm referring particularly that I know of to your work with men and coaching and therapy and the like?
Yeah, it's interesting because, I've been involved in sort of TV and advertising for many, many years, in my 20s and my 30s. Um, and I mean, I don't know how honest and vulnerable I can get, but vulnerability is one of my superpowers.
Well, I would, yeah, I'd far rather, you express yourself, and then at the end,
Cool,
you
cool.
and I might go, but it's extremely unlikely. So just go for it, man. Just be
Yeah,
you.
so I know my parents, they did the best they could. They were very, very young when they had me. My dad struggled with his own addiction, various addictions. My mom also struggled, and I grew up in a very, very, very difficult home, very violent home, and I experienced things that kind of manifested later in life that I really struggled with. I've been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, which has been a big, big thing to navigate in my life. And the addiction stuff, and there's been a lot of trauma over the years. And deep down inside, I always had a calling towards certain healing modalities, even in my early 20s. Um, So I started looking at various sort of treatments or healing ways for a long time, and then I got clean when I was 29, and that for me felt like when the real work started. And it's a bit of a long story, but I was in treatment, and then I was offered a kind of like a junior counselor support role, and I started working at this treatment center, and then yeah, I worked in treatment centers for about 6 years, and it's always felt like a deep calling for me. So that's on the addiction side of things. I think with the men's work, I've had quite a gaping father wound for a long time, and I joined a community called the Mankind Project, and I was initiated in 2018, and that really, really spoke to my heart. I have a deep, deep passion to yeah, to help and empower other men. And it's weird because it feels like a deep layer of service. And through being of service really opens my heart. And I know my heart needs to be open in order for me to thrive in this world and to show up as my truest potential. So, someone once said to me, it's around turning my own pain into power. So I go through phases where I'm extremely grateful for the challenges that I've been dealt in life, because it's allowed me to move into a space where I can be of service to others in the ways that they need. So in terms of a calling, yeah, it's absolutely a calling for me, and I don't have the choice to not answer that calling.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Can you share with me, like one of, if not the hardest truths that you've ever had to face for yourself, or a time maybe that you nearly gave up, uh, anything of that nature? I think that the important thing about
Mm,
these kinds of messy questions,
mm,
are the ones in my experience that are always or often the most valuable to people because
mm,
there's a woman called Lisa Nichols who's done a whole bunch of talks and books and stuff, and she talks about the dip theory. Uh,
mm,
and the dip theory is, like, for example, if I was doing a talk or being interviewed, there'd be me, Simon Eakin. Here's my rather impressive looking CV because I don't put stupid nonsense on my CV. like cycled through Africa, former British Army officer, blah, blah, blah. You know,
Yes.
like, isn't that impressive, right? And then here's where Sai is, and he's doing this amazing stuff, and he's got this vision, and there's a line there, and it's like,
Mm,
but what she says is you take people into the dip or the valley of the
mm,
shadows, and you
mm,
tell them about the dark nights of the soul and the pain of in my
mm,
case, the pain of leaving my ex-wife, the
mm,
impact on my relationship with my children, then
mm,
I think that piece really, really has people leaning in.
mm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, there's been a few moments in my life where I didn't see a way out. Um, Especially in my drug addiction days. I remember it was a Sunday night. It was like 11 o'clock on a Sunday night. And I remember sitting in my car like crying because I didn't want to use drugs. But I was waiting in my car in tears, waiting for my dealer because I didn't know how to stop. That always sticks out for me, the pain I've caused my mother through my own addiction. Real rock bottom moments. I've also struggled massively with porn addiction. It's been a big thing for me. And that's something that's very close to my heart is around how do I heal the younger, or, you know, guide the younger generation around the use of porn, and especially with the internet explosion in the last, say, 15 years, it's an epidemic, really. So I've struggled massively with shame around that and how that has had a huge impact on my own sexuality. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but that's had a dramatic impact on my mind and my body. Um, shame is an interesting one because a lot of people class it as a feeling, but for me, it's more of an energy field. It's more of an embodiment. So I know shame really well, and that dips in and out of my life almost on a day-to-day basis. So that's something I work really close with. So I'm just trying to think of some other pivotal moments. I was married once, that didn't work out. I had to leave that relationship, and I remember it was such a difficult situation because we were both so, I know it's a bit of an old phrase, but we were both so codependent that I literally had to unplug from this relationship. And I had a scooter at the time, and I drove in the rain to a clinic to check myself into a clinic, and that's how the divorce happened. And there's been many instances, suicide attempts in my 20s, car accidents. There's been many sort of exterior challenges, but I think my biggest challenges have been my own internal suffering that lives in my mind. Those have been the really the darkest places that I've been to, where I struggled with suicidal ideation a lot. I was on medication for a long time. And then I came off medication because I wanted to step into the world of plant medicine. That was always a big intention for me. I've had some really dark nights of the soul in ayahuasca ceremonies and work with Iboga. But I know what lies on the other side of these dark nights, and that's the light, because the dark can't exist with the light. And a lot of the time, just that thought alone or that remembrance, yeah, helps me, yeah, move through the waves of discomfort.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm,
It's the common theme that I'm picking up there. The root cause is the mind.
mm,
And that picture of you being in the car and crying and waiting for your drugs to come along, but also not wanting to do it, that absolute, I really felt that. Uh,
mm,
and then here you are now.
Yeah.
And I think this too shall pass. It's the thing that I say probably the most to myself. This too shall pass.
Mm.
This too shall, it generally tends to be associated with the negative, but it is also associated with the positive. You get a great job, you get a
Mhm.
relationship. Yeah, this too shall pass. And it's
Yeah.
amazing to see you now. You look healthy, alert, present. Take yourself back to some of those really darker moments. It must have felt like an impossibility.
Mm.
And I think the mind, Michael Singer
Mm.
wrote a book called The Surrender Experiment and The
Mm.
Untethered Soul. A lot of these
Mm.
teachers talk about, the mind just watching the thought. Just watch it and
Yeah.
wave goodbye.
Yeah.
As opposed to
Oof.
becoming like a fucking alien on the face that
Yeah.
absolutely
Yeah.
governs our mind, right?
And that's a beautiful practice of meditation, which is a big practice in my life.
Mm.
One thing I encourage my clients in the coaching space is, it's all great having one session a week. That's fantastic. But what are you doing in between those sessions? What are your daily practices? What muscles are you exercising? Are you exercising your meditation muscle, your breath work muscle, your journaling? I find that is so important. But just going back to what you said now around, passing thoughts as clouds in the sky, and that's what meditation has really taught me, is just to observe. And a lot of the time is to observe with humor.
Yeah, humor is the great leveler.
Isn't it just?
It really is. And I don't know about you, but if you haven't, I just absolutely recommend anyone to do stand-up comedy once in their life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've actually got a group that I've started with I've done a handful of them, and a couple of other
Okay.
guys have done one's done none, blah blah blah. But it's just the discipline and the
Mm.
gift of
Mm.
actually, I think good stand-up comedy is laughing at yourself, having
Absolutely.
that deep sense of humility. Like, I mean, I'm not a funny guy. Like, I mean, there are people who are funny. I'm not a funny. Can I be funny? Like, yeah, yeah, And so I'm starting to take little notes and stuff, and just going, oh, that's funny. I could make something out of that. And
Cool.
I was at Discam yesterday, and there was this elderly Xhosa man. I
Mm.
was looking at his phone, and the picture on the phone was this magnificent Brahman, sorry, not Brahman, Nguni bull.
Hmm.
And I kind of peered over his shoulder and I said, "Oh, I see you've got a picture of a bull." I said, "Is that yours?" And he said, "No, no, I just love bulls. It's not one of mine, but I actually have a head of cattle in the Eastern Cape." And he said, "I inherited from my father, and he inherited from his father. And unfortunately, I don't have any sons." And I said, "I'll be your son." It's like, no, but it's not, but the point is, it's looking for humor, and I think why looking for
Mm.
humorous opportunities. I
Mm.
think humor is, in fact, it reminded me of there was a poll done many years ago on the kind of main successful traits of leaders. And number
Mhm.
one, sorry, number two was the ability to build resonance and connection with people. And number one was the appropriate use of humor,
Interesting.
particularly in negative, difficult circumstances. For
Sure.
someone to be under extreme stress
Sure.
and then crack a joke is quite a thing. Hey? Just like,
Oh yeah. It really is a medicine. It's a medicine. And a couple of other medicines that come to mind is movement. Movement's also a medicine. Exercise is a big one. So yeah, thank you for that reminder.
yeah, nice one. I mean, what
Mm.
makes you laugh at yourself? And if anything.
So so a few of my shadows that don't serve me is I can be obsessed with time. I can be a perfectionist. I can obsess around the way I look. Um, I can be super, super negative. I struggle with anger sometimes. I've got like OCD, I'm like the OCD spectrum. So, um, the like the corner of a pillow needs to line up exactly with the couch. And a lot of the time, like I'll catch myself in these moments and I just have a little chuckle and I just take a deep breath and just say, dude, it's okay, man. Like, it's okay. Um,
Nice.
yeah. But it's interesting that you bring up the stand-up thing because that's actually been a little bit of a dream of mine. I just haven't had the courage to actually get up in front of people and show up in the way I would like. Because I also journaling's a big thing for me, and I like to journal about humor. It's a yeah, it's a therapeutic process for me. So maybe you and I can chat about that.
Well, if you, I mean, you don't have to say yes or no now, but think about
Mm,
I can add you to this group of one or two
cool.
people I know on it, but we're just a bunch of complete amateur idiot, one of
Awesome.
uh,
Yeah.
but it is yeah, it's a humor is a great leveler, isn't it? I am so I wanted to ask you,
Mm,
what are you unlearning?
mm. Yeah, for me, that's the most important question. A lot of the time, we live in a we live in a world where, it's all about productivity and growth, and I need to learn this and expand and upscale and be productive, and it's just build, build, build. But I so believe so deeply in my heart that what do we need to unlearn? What do we need to dissolve in order to return to our essence? Um, what am I unlearning at the moment? I am, it's not so much of an unlearning, but it's more of a surrender process, and that's control. It's a big one for me. I'm trying to unlearn how to be in control. It's a huge, huge deal for me because it plays out in so many different ways. I'm unlearning to drop into shame every time something impacts me or I internalize something. Big one for me.
Hmm,
I am unlearning that I need exterior affirmation to feel good about myself.
that's good.
I'm unlearning that I need to be something. Or should I say, I'm unlearning that I need to do something. And my intention is to show up in a space of being.
Yeah,
That's really, really relative for me now.
yeah, beautiful.
I heard something really cool the other day. It's a podcast I was listening to. I forget the guy's name. He's known as the mind architect. And he's on this podcast and he asks the podcast host, who paint us the most spiritual picture of a person, of the most spiritual person you know. And the guy's like, he's an old man in robes in a temple in Tibet, and he meditates for 6 hours a day and he eats rice. And the guy eventually interrupted him and said, no, the most spiritually enlightened people in the world are children, and I know for myself, I've got all these layers and layers and layers that life has built up. And how do I unlearn and how do I dissolve all of that to return to my true essence?
Yeah,
But still in a healthy masculine way. I don't want to revert back to my wounded little boy.
yeah,
So there's something really important about connecting with that pure energy that we all still have in us. It sometimes gets lost because of the constructs in the world we live in.
yeah.
Yeah.
And tell me about we've got a few minutes left. So tell me about briefly about for for those who don't know, men's circles and perhaps particularly about what you just touched on there, the inner child?
Yeah, so I am starting a series of circles specifically around men's work. And I've been running circles in men's communities and treatment facilities for a long time. It's a deep, deep passion of mine. So I'm running my first circle on Tuesday, the 8th of July, on a new platform called Emergence, which is this really, really amazing community that has been built. It's still early days, so it's still gathering momentum, but it's really a platform where you can access some amazing courses and teachers and mentors and circles. Yeah, it's really an exciting project. So I'm launching some online men's circles there. The first one's based on it's called Honoring Your Inner Boy. So it's all about inner child work. I've got circles lined up around the masks we wear as men, men in addiction, porn prevention. I'm in the process of designing courses, 21-day courses, 6-week courses.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's a really, really, really exciting time.
Fabulous. Good. Well,
Yeah,
I'll make a note of some of these things,
cool.
links and stuff. There's one I'm gonna introduce you to, which is a friend of mine, a guy called Erkan, who lives in North Cyprus, and he
Hmm.
interviewed a guy called Joel with a Dutch name, and he's
Hmm.
a documentary and filmmaker, and
Okay.
he's actually done a documentary called Fans Only, exploring the human side of the porn industry, speaking to,
Okay.
to
Stunning.
how often there's so much shame and like, I mean, something I think he said
Mm.
something like 80% of traffic on the internet is porn, right? So like basically everyone's watching porn, but no one's admitting it. It's like, or
Mhm.
something like that. It's like
Yeah.
we need to do better than that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because when you don't admit it, it lives in the shadows.
Exactly.
And if we ignore it, it's going to grow. That has to come into the light. And I know it's such a difficult thing to talk about, but these discussions need to be had.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I'm also going to I've been reading and I haven't got to the end of it, a fantastic book on masculinity called, I think it's
Mm.
called To Be a Man or Being a
Hmm.
Man. Can't remember the author, but boy, he really does some good work on shame. He says that shame
Amazing.
is the biggest wound that particularly
Oof.
men carry. It's a real shocker,
Yeah.
isn't it? Um, Good. Okay, man. So let me just see
Cool.
here, last couple of minutes. Let me do this. This is quite an interesting, like a lightning truths, quick fire. Uh,
Mm.
what's a book or quote that cracked you open?
The book I would say was The Artist's Way.
Ah, very good.
Mm.
Nice.
Yeah, that's the first thing that comes up for me. In terms of a quote, nothing comes to me right now. But the
Gotcha.
book, The Artist's Way. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the artist way. What song gets you back in your body?
There's a song by a sister in the medicine community called The Beauty Way.
The Beauty Way by Sister.
Mm. Yeah, I don't want to disclose her name. She's a close friend of mine. That's the
Okay,
first the first yeah,
beautiful.
first song that
And
comes up.
then who do you call when your heart breaks?
God.
Beautiful. Good. Excellent, man. So, if you were to have a word or a phrase that would sum up this conversation, or no, better still, to give advice to someone based on this conversation, kind of in a nutshell, or some version thereof, what would you say?
Can you just repeat that? Sorry.
Yeah, it wasn't a clear question. Let me
No,
say,
no, no. It's my mind was still on the previous answer that I gave you. I said God, but I know that's a very loaded word. So I'm gonna say higher consciousness. Thank you.
nice.
Okay,
Um,
repeat the question. Sorry.
yeah, so let me say. what one word of advice would you have to give to someone, a child, the human race, about what you've learned in your life? One piece of advice.
Hold on to hope.
Second,
Hold on to hope.
hold on to hope. Okay.
Mm.
Thank you. And then the
And then
last,
I've got another one. I've got another one.
yes,
You are magnificent.
nice.
Mm.
Beautiful.
Mm.
Thanks, brother. The last question I have for you is if you could whisper something brave into the ear of the next guest, what would you say?
Keep your heart open.
Fantastic.
Mm.
Beautiful, man. So
Bless you,
thank
brother.
thank you very much. I'm gonna end the recording and then we'll just wrap it up offline. But Lee, thank you so much.
Cool.
It's been a great conversation and lots of food
Uh,
for thought.
Thank you so much for having me, Simon. I really, really appreciate it. And I see you. And yeah, I just think you held the space with reverence. And yeah, I'm deeply grateful for your time.
Thanks, man. Good stuff.
Take care, brother.
Cheers, and you.
Cheers.